Hey everybody, welcome back to a new video on this channel, and today we look into sharing data between your Nitro backend and your Nuxt frontend. In the same application, of course. Here we go. No matter if you build your whole frontend and backend with Nuxt.js or having an external application that you maybe want to connect with your backend for frontend approach, Nitro is often a way to go when you use the Nuxt application. If you haven't used Nitro so far, then check out one of the couple videos I made, link in the description and also up here, about Nuxt versus Nitro, what the differences are, and of course how to apply the just mentioned BFF pattern. That shouldn't be the topic of the video here. Instead, we look into something else, because very often on the backend you might need to fetch information about your user, about certain settings, maybe around A/B testing and other things, and you want to provide that over to your frontend. The question is how to do it the most efficient way. And of course, for that, we prepared a little demo application. So let's dive into that and see how we can share data between Nitro and Nuxt the easiest, ideally without refetching and very performant. As usual, our Nuxt application is as minimal as possible. We have an almost empty Nuxt config TS and then an app.view that just says, let's share some data. And this is exactly what we want to do. In the browser, we see also just that. Let's share some data, the glorious Nuxt dev tools down here, but that's for another time. Maybe deep dive into that. If you're interested in that, but please let me know in the comments and we might do that. But now back to the data sharing part. We start by just building a very simple endpoint in our server folder, or actually in this case, a middleware. So let's say we have a middleware and we just call it abtest.ts. So in here, we want to fetch some information about the user. So we could say, okay, there are some A/B testing information we want to actually retrieve. So let's say based on just a very complex algorithm, math.random, we set the variant by just like flipping a coin more or less and say it's either at variant A or variant B. We'll keep it, of course, simple because it's a testing application, but you have quite some other use cases I can imagine. And then the next thing we want to do is, of course, with that variant, we want to set our A/B test object. So we could say, okay, const A/B test info, for example, and have the variant in here, obviously, and then maybe some data. And the data is, well, ideally fetched from somewhere else. That could be another endpoint. That could be from some kind of cache. That doesn't matter too much in our case. And we just need to implement that function. So let's do that real quick. No problem. We can just say, okay, the variant is not even a string. It's A or B. We know this pretty precisely. So let's type that nicely. And then we say, okay, if the variant is A, well, then we just return a message that says variant A was chosen. And it could be like way more information down here, right? That could be information about components, how they should be rendered, certain settings that should be set, the different theming, whatsoever. This is like fully up to you down here. And of course, if that's not the case, then we just say it was a B. So we have that information. As said before, this usually comes from somewhere else. Also make it async so we can more or less replicate that as close as possible to being async. But the key part here is, okay, we have that information we have to fetch in our middleware or at some other point in our Nitro backend, because we might need it there already to set a different connection to the database, to set some fields, to change some things. So basically anything you need in your backend to already prepare the requests of that user to be successful, but you also sometimes need it in the front-end part. So in that case, the easiest way we could use is we could just say, great, let's put it all in an API endpoint instead of that function down there, of course, and just refetch it in the Nuxt frontend, for example, on the server side there. While this is fully possible, and then also that requests will not go through the whole round trip, because Nitro will deduplicate that and say, hey, look, this is to my server, so I can just run this event handler function that we then would write for that endpoint. That's not the most ideal version because, well, we fetched it once, so why not keeping it along and reusing it? Because it's there already. We don't have to fetch twice necessarily. And this is exactly what we will do now. To do so, let's just imagine we'd have some other logic here. You might want to like redirect, abort, whatsoever. The most powerful thing we can do is attaching this A/B test info object with all the information we need to the event context. So we do event.context.A/B test info is A/B test info. Great. So this is already possibly something you want to do, because throughout the life cycle of the request, you might hit another endpoint, you do whatever you want based on that middleware as well. And you probably need that information further down the line anyway. So it doesn't hurt to attach it to the global context. This is also request specific, so it will not stay longer than for that specific request and will be reset per request. So this is not some kind of global state, but a per request state here. Also, one other thing, this is typed to any now, so how about we fix that real quick? And to do so, we add a new file in our server directory and we call this, well, you can call it anything. People call it index, env, I'll still stick with env, and you want to create a d.ts file. And in here, you actually want to override, or at least augment, because you don't fully override it, it's more an augmentation, that event context type. And you see this is type of h3 event context. So this is what you want to override, and here's how it goes. First of all, you have to declare the module that the type is part of, and we know in this case that this is from H3, the underlying HTTP framework of Nitro itself. This also is hinted by seeing H3 context, but also if you follow along here, we see this is part of H3 event. We have the context here, fine, and we are in node modules H3. So let's declare it here, and then we have the interface H3 event context. And now, because of interfaces and the so-called declaration merging, which means if you, well, define the definition of interface afterwards, again, they will just be merged and not like fully overridden. Well, we can augment the types here really easy. And in this case, that means we need AB test info in here, and we can say variant is type of, we can be very specific and say A, B, then we probably have to change something in our code in a bit, and then we have data, and data, let's be not that specific here, just say it's record string, and we're good to go. Of course, if you have types for that, you want to specify that even more, but for our example, that should be enough. Now, the next thing, let's check back here. Let's see, okay, AB test info, that's still any, that's a bit strange. So why is that? First of all, we need to make it optional because we want to set it at some point, so it could be also undefined, but this still didn't change anything here, right? But what will change it is, and that's always the case, we need an export for every DTS file to actually apply the whole thing and augment the module. So this part is very important. Without the export, it wouldn't work at all. And now we see, okay, here we get a TypeScript error because variant is string, while it should only be AB. So we can just say this is A or B. We could even just create a variant type, but it's fine. And now things are aligning here correctly. So also a little bit of TypeScript gymnastics, nothing too crazy, but if you ever come in the scenario where we want to augment the Nitro, or in this case H3 event context, this is how you do it. But so far so good. Now we added the information to the context, but can our Nuxt frontend just access them easily? Well, not exactly, but with a little trick. We'll do that now. And to now basically take over that part, we want to access the event itself on the Nuxt side. And the most important part is we can only do this through the initial request, because only then we actually have an event. And it only works, well, with server-side rendering in place. Without server-side rendering, that's not a thing at all. We don't have to do that. Then, of course, you have to request things the old-fashioned way with an API endpoint and a request. But so how we do this is we create a plugin. So let's call it also abtest.ts. And in here, we say we want to export default define Nuxt plugin. And here we use the object syntax. So we give it a name like abtest. And then we have a setup function that can be async as before. So that's, if you're not aware of the syntax, is the function that was usually here. Also on that, I made a whole video, so definitely check it out because, well, it doesn't hurt, and you can even make cool things like depending plugins on each other, making sure the execution time is in the right time, and so on, so on. So a lot of cool things with the object syntax that are possible and relieve you from a few, well, not so nice workarounds or hacks, so to say. But back to the plugin. In our setup function, what we want to do is we want to read out the event context, and then we want to save the important parts. So also here, these are two different steps. So what you can always do is you can decide to ignore certain parts of the event context and only save the important parts, which allows you to have leaner payloads. And everything you do here, this is very important, will be available in plain text. It will be transferred from the server to the client, so it will be in the HTML as well. Okay, and the first part is we want to make sure we are on the server side. So we have to make an if here and say if import on meta.server, then all of these things will happen here. You could also say to make it straight away a server plugin by using .server.ts. But in our case, we might want to do something on the client side on the initial request, like setting up some services, passing it to stores. So you can definitely do that over here because we will get the data before it anyway. And to get the event, well, we use request event. This is basically giving us the event of the request. We see this is also returning that H3 event that's available. And then we can do something. And of course, now we have access to event.context and also .context A/B test info. Now, interestingly, VS Code already inserted a question mark here because event might not be available. Because you could also call use request event on the client side and then it would return null. But because we got it with imported meta.server, we can assert that it's there and ensure TypeScript we know what's happening here. With A/B test info, well, in our case, we also know it's there, but depending on your setup, you might not want to assert that. But here it is. And basically we have the information here. If we say console.log over here, we can log all of that at the moment. So let's have a look what's happening here if we now refresh the page. And when refreshing, we see SSR, the SSR logs that are also now logged to the console of the browser, object B, data, it was B. So we get the information, and if you reload again, we will see, oh, in this case it's A. Great, 50-50 chance, here we go. Wonderful. So this is exactly what we need, but now we still need to make sure this is in the front end, this is transferred over, because right now we have it on the server side, but it's not accessible everywhere. And to do that, well, in plain view, you would just use a ref, but as we're in Nuxt and we don't want to have it as like global state pollution, we use, you guessed it, use state. So in the very start, we say const A/B tests data or whatsoever is use state, and then we take a nice key, let's say A/B test, for example. You can also, once again, type it, but I will omit it here for the sake of that example. And to save the important parts, we can say A/B test data.value equals, and now we could just take all of that, or we say we will only want the variant or the data. It doesn't matter too much. That's all up to you. So now we have it saved here. And when this plugin is executed on the client side again, so outside of that if, well, then twice, we can also just say like we have an else here, then this use state will still be populated because on the server side, we populate it. And as it's transferred from the server to the client side, it is also available there. And we can even go a step further. So what I would suggest is if you have that use A/B test or like use state A/B test construct here, why not creating a composable straight away? Because you probably want to use it in some parts in your components as well, which you definitely can. So let's close everything here and just say like, okay, composables use A/B tests.ts, not .view. And what we can do is we can just take this part and say export default, or even say export cons use A/B test. The result will be the same, and we'll make it a function just returning that. So this is our very simple small composable. And now we can just say, okay, use A/B test, and we're good to go. And in our app.view, you know what we'll do now? We say const data is use A/B test, and we'll show this data in, let's say, a pre-tag. And instead of saying let's share some data, we hopefully have the data in here. Now let's take a look at our website and what it will say in our case. And there we go. Variant A, variant B, we have all the information we need. When we refresh, we get that update. And very important, we have also to check the source code so it's available during SSR as well. And luckily we see it already here. We have variant A, data message, variant A was chosen. So also during server-side rendering, that info is available. And the best part is that for this, you don't even need any additional API call because you fetch the data before anyway. So if you have the case when you need data on the backend and you want to transfer them to the front end because you need them there as well, well, now you know how to bridge the gap, so to say, between Nitro and Nuxt. I hope that helps. Definitely take a look at the other videos that I mentioned, or also on this channel if you want to learn more about that. Drop all the questions you have or thoughts in the comments. I wonder if you have any good use cases for that, because I've been with a couple clients that said like, okay, look, we need that. We can't refetch everything. This is very costly. So yeah, I wonder if you have some cases where you could, or maybe already did apply it so far. Let me know. And of course, check out latest Deja Vu episode. That will be a very fun one. I promise. We have the one and only Matt Perry on. We talk about motion view and motion in general. And other than that, stay tuned for the next video on next Friday. And if you have any suggestions, drop them in the comment as well. Enjoy the rest of the week or whenever you're watching this, and happy hacking, folks.